Montana Territory, 1889. The crimson sunset bled across the sky as Nora Ellis stood on the porch of her isolated cabin, watching the distant mountains swallow the last light. At 22, she had already lived more lifetimes than most women twice her age. The wind tugged at her chestnut hair as she surveyed the small homestead she'd maintained alone for 3 years since her father's passing. Solitude keeps you alive out here, she whispered to herself, the mantra she'd repeated since burying her father. Her slender fingers traced the weathered railing, callous's testament to years of self-reliance. Nora wore a simple blue calico dress, patched at the elbows but clean. She maintained standards even when no one was watching. That's what her father had taught her. Nora believed with unwavering conviction that dependence on others only led to heartbreak. The frontier had taken everyone she'd ever loved, her mother to fever, her brother to a mining accident, and finally her father to consumption. Each death had carved another chamber in her heart where love once resided, leaving her hollow and determined never to fill those spaces again. Better to embrace the emptiness than invite more grief. She had what she needed: 20 acres of decent land, a small vegetable garden, 3 dairy cows, a few chickens, and enough skill with her father's rifle to keep predators, both animal and human, at a distance. The nearest town, Silver Creek, lay 15 miles west, and she made the journey only when absolutely necessary for supplies she couldn't produce herself. Nora's nearest neighbor, Mrs. Willoughby, lived 4 miles south and occasionally sent her young son with baked goods and invitations to Sunday suppers that Nora invariably declined. The townsfolk had taken to calling her the ghost woman, more phantom than person, appearing briefly to trade goods before vanishing back to her sanctuary of solitude. As darkness settled, Nora caught sight of something unexpected, a thin trail of dust rising from the eastern path that wound toward her property. Visitors were rare and unwelcome. She stepped inside, quickly retrieving her Winchester rifle from its place above the door, then returned to the porch, the weapon held with practiced confidence. The approaching party materialized into view. 2 riders on tired horses, one significantly older than the other. They advanced slowly, without the predatory haste of bandits or the entitled swagger of land speculators. "That's far enough," Nora called when they were within earshot, but still a safe distance from her porch steps. The younger man raised his hands in a gesture of peace. Even in the fading light, she could see he was handsome, perhaps 25, with wheat-colored hair beneath a dust-covered hat and shoulders broad from honest labor. His face showed fatigue but kindness, a combination Nora had learned to distrust. "Beg your pardon, ma'am," he called, his voice carrying clear in the evening air. "My name is Quinn Irving, and this is my father, Wallace Irving. We've been traveling since dawn, and my father's not well. We spotted your chimney smoke and wondered if we might trouble you for water and perhaps shelter for the night. We can pay, of course." Nora's grip tightened on the rifle. "There's a creek half a mile back for water, and Silver Creek Town is another 10 miles west. You'll find lodging there." The older man coughed then, a painful, racking sound that made Nora wince despite herself. The younger man, Quinn, looked at his father with concern before turning back to Nora. "My father can't manage another 10 miles today, ma'am. He's taken ill on our journey. Just one night by your fire is all we ask, and we'll be gone at first light." Something in his eyes, earnest, worried, yet maintaining dignity, stirred a memory of her father's final days. The old man coughed again, this time nearly falling from his saddle before Quinn steadied him. "Please," Quinn added softly, "I wouldn't ask if there were another way." Nora stood frozen, her practical mind warring with something deeper. This was exactly how troubles began, with sympathy, with opening doors that should remain closed. Yet she found herself speaking before her better judgment could intervene. "You can use the barn," she said finally. "There's clean straw and it's dry. I'll bring water and something hot. But at first light, you ride on." Relief washed over Quinn's face. "Thank you. You have my word will be no trouble." As they led their horses toward the barn, Nora wondered if she had just made a terrible mistake. The frontier taught harsh lessons about trust, and she had survived by learning them well. One night, she told herself, one act of basic human decency, then back to the safety of her isolation. She couldn't have known that this single decision would crack the foundation of everything she believed about survival on the frontier. Quinn settled his father onto a makeshift bed of clean straw covered with their travel blankets. The old man's forehead burned with fever, but his eyes remained sharp with awareness. "You didn't need to play up your illness, Pa," Quinn muttered. Wallace Irving gave a weak smile. "Wasn't playing, son, but I might have coughed a bit more dramatically than necessary." His expression grew serious. "That girl's eyes are older than she is. Reminds me of your mother after the war." Before Quinn could respond, the barn door opened. Nora entered carrying a tray with a steaming pot, cups, and a small loaf of bread. Quinn quickly rose to his feet, removing his hat. "I've made broth," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "And there's water in the bucket for washing." "You're very kind, Miss Ellis." Nora Ellis. She set the tray down on a barrel. "The broth might help your father's cough." As she turned to leave, Wallace called out, "Would you join us, Miss Ellis? Been a long while since we've had proper company." Nora hesitated, visibly uncomfortable. "I have chores to finish before dark." "Of course," Quinn said. "Thank you for the food." She nodded curtly and departed, but not before Quinn noticed how the lamplight caught the deep brown of her eyes, revealing flecks of amber. Her face, though guarded, possessed a natural beauty unenhanced by the cosmetics favored by town women. Wallace sipped the broth and sighed appreciatively. "Good cook. Reminds me of your mother's recipe." He fixed Quinn with a knowing look. "Pretty girl, too." "Pa, don't start." Quinn busied himself with tending the horses. "We'll be gone tomorrow, heading to your brother's place in Helena as planned." Wallace smiled into his cup. "Plans changed, son. They always do." Outside, Nora completed her evening chores with mechanical efficiency, trying to ignore the warm light spilling from the barn's windows and the occasional laughter that drifted out, a sound her property hadn't known in years. She told herself their presence meant nothing, just travelers passing through her life as countless others had passed through the territory, leaving no mark. But as she lay in bed that night, sleep eluded her. The knowledge that others slept nearby, that she wasn't truly alone, stirred something she'd thought long buried, the simple human comfort of proximity. "It doesn't mean anything," she whispered to the darkness. "Tomorrow they'll be gone, and everything returns to normal." But even as she spoke the words, some quiet part of her wondered what normal truly was, and whether solitude had been a choice or merely the absence of alternatives. Morning brought clarity, and with it, resolve. Nora rose early, as was her habit, determined to see the travelers on their way with minimum interaction. She stepped outside to gather eggs and milk the cows, the routine comforting in its familiarity. As she approached the chicken coop, she was startled to find Quinn already there, gathering eggs with practiced hands. "Good morning, Miss Ellis," he said, straightening. "Hope you don't mind. Thought I'd make myself useful while Pa rests." Nora's surprise must have shown on her face, for he added, "Grew up on a ranch in Colorado. Chickens don't change much state to state." "Your father, is he worse?" she asked, trying to mask her concern. "Better, actually. The night's rest did him good." "But," Quinn hesitated, "I was hoping we might impose on your kindness for one more day. I'd work for our keep, of course. That fence line on your north pasture could use mending, and I noticed your woodpile's running low." Nora stiffened. This was precisely how it began, small requests that became dependencies. "We agreed on one night." "We did," Quinn acknowledged, "and I'll honor that if you insist. But my father could use another day's recovery before we tackle the mountain passes. And your homestead could use an extra pair of hands." Before she could refuse, Wallace appeared at the barn door. Though still pale, he stood straighter than the previous evening. "Morning, Miss Ellis," he called. "Your broth worked wonders. Best I've felt in days." Nora looked between father and son, feeling cornered. The sensible decision was clear: send them on their way. But Wallace's improved, yet still fragile condition gave her pause. "One more day," she finally conceded. "But I expect work in exchange for lodging." Quinn's smile was genuine, reaching his clear blue eyes. "You'll get a fair day's labor, Miss Ellis. You have my word." True to his promise, Quinn spent the morning repairing her fence line while Nora tended the garden, keeping a wary distance. Wallace sat in the shade, whittling a piece of wood and occasionally offering conversation that Nora reluctantly returned. "Been on your own long?" the old man asked casually. 3 years. Nora pulled weeds with more force than necessary. "Since my father passed." Wallace nodded thoughtfully. Lost my wife when Quinn was 16. Frontier's hard on families. The frontier is hard on everyone, Nora replied. That's why it's better to rely on yourself. Is it? Wallace's weathered face showed no judgment, only curiosity. Seems to me the pioneers who survived best were those who formed communities, helped each other through hard times. Nora straightened, wiping soil from her hands. Communities can disappoint you. People leave, or die, or choose their own interests when times get difficult. Some do, Wallace agreed. Not all. Nora had no answer for that, so she returned to her gardening, but the old man's words lingered uncomfortably. By midday, the spring sun beat down with surprising warmth. Quinn had removed his shirt as he worked, revealing a muscular torso bronzed by outdoor work. Nora found herself watching him longer than was proper, admiring the fluid strength with which he handled the fence posts and the careful precision of his repairs. He caught her looking once and smiled, causing her to quickly avert her eyes and focus intently on her vegetables. A warmth that had nothing to do with the sun spread across her cheeks. That evening, to her own surprise, Nora invited them to dine in her cabin rather than the barn. It was practical, she told herself, easier than carrying food back and forth. But as she prepared a stew more elaborate than any she'd made in months, she couldn't deny a certain anticipation. Dinner conversation flowed more easily than she'd expected. Quinn spoke of their journey from Colorado, where drought had forced them to sell their ranch. We're heading to my uncle's place near Helena, he explained. He's offered Pa a place to stay and me work with his horses. Quinn has a way with difficult animals, Wallace added proudly. Best horseman in 3 counties back home. Quinn looked embarrassed. Pa exaggerates. But I do all right with horses. He turned to Nora. This stew is excellent, Miss Ellis. Been a while since we've had a home-cooked meal this good. It's nothing special, she demurred, though pleasure at the compliment warmed her. Why do you stay out here alone? Quinn asked suddenly. Most women your age would be in town, or at least with family. The question was direct, but not unkind. Still, Nora felt her walls rising. This land was my father's dream. He believed it would provide security that no town or employer could. She looked around at the simple cabin. He was right. I answer to no one, need nothing from anyone. Except occasional help with fence posts, Quinn said with a gentle smile that somehow contained no mockery. For the first time in years, Nora laughed, a small sound, rusty from disuse, but genuine. Except that, she admitted. Later, as the Irvings returned to the barn for the night, Nora stood in her doorway watching them go. The evening had been pleasant, dangerous territory indeed. The second day stretched into a third when a spring storm swept in, making travel impossible. Nora found herself sharing close quarters with her unexpected guests as rain lashed the cabin and thunder rolled across the valley. Should clear by morning, Quinn observed, peering through the window at the darkened sky. Nora nodded, acutely aware of how different her home felt with others in it. Warmer somehow, despite the chill outside. Over the past days, Quinn had split enough firewood to last her a month, repaired her chicken coop, and helped clear a drainage ditch that had been troubling her garden. Wallace had contributed by mending harnesses and telling stories that, despite her resistance, occasionally made her smile. They played cards that evening by lamplight, and Nora discovered that Quinn had a terrible poker face, while Wallace was surprisingly shrewd. When she won for the third time, Quinn threw down his cards in mock disgust. I should have known better than to play against a woman who's had years to perfect her poker face in solitude. Actually, Nora admitted, I haven't played since my father taught me. He always said I had a natural talent for bluffing. Smart man, your father, Wallace commented. What brought him out this way? Nora hesitated, unused to sharing her history. But something about the storm outside and the warmth within loosened her tongue. The war changed him. He served with the Union Army, came back different. Said he couldn't stomach crowds or questions anymore. Her fingers traced patterns on the table. My mother died of fever when I was 14, then my brother in a mine collapsed 2 years later. After that, Pa decided the further from civilization, the better. And you came with him, Quinn said softly. He was all I had left. Nora's voice remained steady. We built this place together. When consumption took him, I stayed because it was home. The only one I had left. Quinn's eyes held hers across the table, something unspoken passing between them. Must have been lonely, he said finally. Safe, she corrected. Being alone means being safe. Wallace cleared his throat. Been my experience that safety's an illusion out here, whether you're alone or not. Tornado doesn't care if you've got company or live solitary. Neither does drought or fever. But grief is easier when there's no one to lose, Nora countered. Is it? Quinn asked. Or is it just emptier? The question hung in the air, disrupting convictions Nora had held for years. Before she could formulate a response, a tremendous crash of thunder shook the cabin, causing the lamp to flicker. Outside, an animal screamed in panic. The horses. Quinn was on his feet instantly, grabbing his coat. You can't go out in this, Nora protested, but he was already at the door. They'll break their leads if they're spooked badly enough, he explained, pulling on his boots. Won't be long. Against her better judgment, Nora grabbed her own coat. I'm coming with you. Together they dashed through the downpour to the barn, where they found the horses indeed panicked, one having broken free and kicked over a lantern. Thankfully, the rain-soaked wood hadn't caught fire. Quinn moved with calm authority, speaking soothingly to the frightened animals while Nora secured the fallen lantern and helped corner the loose horse. Easy now, girl, Quinn murmured, his hand steady as he approached the nervous mare. Nothing to fear here. His presence seemed to calm the animal, and within minutes he had her secured again, running a hand down her flank and checking for injuries. You really do have a way with them, Nora observed, impressed despite herself. Quinn smiled, rainwater dripping from his hair. They just need to know they're not alone in their fear. Their eyes met in the dimness, and something shifted between them, a recognition, perhaps, of similar wounds differently managed. Quinn's hand, still warm from the horse's flank, reached out slowly and brushed a strand of wet hair from Nora's face. She should have stepped back, maintained her carefully constructed distance. Instead, she stood motionless, her breath catching. The moment stretched, elastic with possibility, until another crash of thunder broke the spell. They pulled apart, suddenly aware of their sodden clothes and the impropriety of their situation. We should get back, Nora said, her voice unsteady. Quinn nodded, but as they headed toward the barn door, he placed a gentle hand on her arm. Thank you for coming to help. Most women wouldn't have. I'm not most women, she replied automatically. His smile deepened. No, Miss Ellis. You certainly are not. They returned to the cabin where Wallace, looking suspiciously unsurprised by their drenched state, provided dry blankets and tactfully busied himself with stoking the fire while they changed behind makeshift screens. Later, as the storm gradually subsided and Wallace snored softly in the chair by the fire, Nora found herself alone with Quinn at the table, sharing the last of her father's whiskey. You never said what brought you and your father to Montana, she said quietly. Quinn studied his glass. Similar story to yours, in some ways. The drought took our ranch, but even before that. He hesitated. I was engaged to be married. Margaret, the banker's daughter. Everyone said we were a perfect match. He took a sip of whiskey, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. 2 weeks before the wedding, I found her with another man. Son of a cattle baron, richer prospects than a rancher's boy. I'm sorry, Nora said genuinely. Quinn shrugged, but the casual gesture didn't match the hurt still visible in his eyes. Made me wonder if I was a fool to think someone like her would be content with someone like me. Started thinking maybe Pa had the right idea after the war. Keep moving, don't put down roots too deep. Is that why you're going to your uncle's? Another temporary stop. That was the plan, Quinn admitted. Work the season, save some money, move on before winter. He looked at her directly. But plans change. The implication hung between them, delicate and dangerous. Nora lowered her eyes to her glass. Not all plans should change. Some are made for good reasons. Like your plan to live alone forever? It's worked so far. Has it? Quinn's voice was gentle. Or has it just been the path of least resistance? Nora had no answer, and soon after they retired, Quinn to a pallet near his father, Nora to her small bedroom. But sleep eluded her as Quinn's words echoed in her mind, challenging certainties she'd built her life around. The morning dawned clear, the storm having washed the world clean. With the roads passable again, there was no logical reason for the Irvings to remain. Nora rose early, steeling herself for their departure, telling herself the hollow feeling in her chest was relief, not regret. She found Quinn already outside, tending to the horses. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. Beautiful morning, he commented. Yes, good traveling weather. It is. He continued, brushing his horse, movements methodical. Pa and I were talking. We've imposed on your hospitality long enough. You've more than earned your keep, Nora said automatically, then wished she hadn't. It sounded like an invitation to stay, which she certainly hadn't intended. Had she? Even so, we should be on our way. Quinn set down the brush. But before we go, there's something you should see. Curious despite herself, Nora followed him to the small paddock behind the barn where her milk cows grazed. To her surprise, one had clearly begun labor during the night. First calf? Quinn asked, leaning on the fence. Nora nodded. Yes, I wasn't expecting it for another week at least. First births can be tricky. Pa and I have delivered hundreds of calves. We could stay, help you through it. She wanted to refuse, to insist she could manage alone as she had everything else. But the practical reality was that a difficult calving could result in losing both cow and calf, a financial blow she could ill afford. Until the calf comes, she agreed reluctantly. Then you really must go. Wallace joined them, assessing the situation with experienced eyes. Might be today, might be tomorrow, he observed. But she'll need watching either way. And so the Irvings stayed another day, which turned into two as the cow showed signs of slow progress. During this time, Quinn continued making himself useful around the homestead, while Nora found herself sharing more of her daily life than she had intended. They worked side by side in the garden, their hands occasionally brushing as they planted the season's vegetables. They rode the property boundaries together, Quinn pointing out places where fencing needed attention before summer cattle drives might bring strays onto her land. In the evenings, Wallace told stories of the early days of Colorado Territory, while Quinn played harmonica tunes that made Nora's cabin feel more like a home than it had in years. On the afternoon of the second day, the cow finally delivered a healthy heifer calf with minimal complications, thanks largely to Quinn's steady hands and calming presence. As they watched the newborn take its first wobbly steps, Nora felt an unexpected swell of emotion. She's beautiful, she murmured. Yes, Quinn agreed, but when she glanced up, she found him looking not at the calf, but at her. That evening, Wallace announced he was turning in early, leaving Quinn and Nora alone by the fire. An awkward silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. You'll be leaving tomorrow, Nora finally said, stating the obvious. Is that what you want? Quinn asked quietly. It's what we agreed. That's not what I asked, Nora. The use of her given name, spoken with such gentle intimacy, broke something inside her. What I want doesn't matter. What matters is what makes sense, what's practical. And what's practical is to be alone, to never take a chance on anyone again. Yes, she said firmly. Because people leave, Quinn. They die or they choose something else or someone else. My mother, my brother, my father, they all left me alone in the end. Quinn moved closer, his eyes intent on hers. I'm not saying I won't ever leave this earth, Nora. No one can promise that. But I can promise I wouldn't choose to leave you. Not willingly. You don't even know me, she protested, though her voice lacked conviction. I know enough, he said simply. I know you're the strongest woman I've ever met. I know you have a kindness you try to hide beneath practicality. I know when you smile, really smile, it lights up your whole face. He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. And I know that in 3 days, you've made me question everything I thought I wanted. Made me wonder if there might be something worth staying in one place for. Nora's heart hammered against her ribs. Quinn, a sharp knock at the door interrupted whatever she might have said. They sprang apart as Wallace emerged from his room, instantly alert despite having supposedly been asleep. Quinn opened the door to reveal a disheveled young boy of perhaps 12, Mrs. Willoughby's son, Nora realized with surprise. Miss Ellis, the boy gasped. Ma sent me. There's riders coming, bad men asking about your place. Said they heard a woman was living alone out here. Nora felt cold dread settle in her stomach. Did they say what they wanted? The boy shook his head. Ma didn't like the look of them. Told them you'd moved on months ago, but she wasn't sure they believed her. Quinn's expression hardened. How many? 3 that Ma saw? Wallace moved to the window, peering out into the gathering darkness. They could be coming tonight, or they could wait till morning. Either way, you need to leave, Nora said to Quinn. This isn't your fight. Quinn's jaw set stubbornly. If you think I'm riding out and leaving you to face 3 armed men alone, you don't know me at all." "He's right," Wallace added. 3 against 1 are poor odds, even for someone as capable as you, Miss Ellis." The boy shifted anxiously. "Ma says you should come stay with us till they move on." Nora shook her head. "And leave my animals? My home?" "No." She crossed to the cabinet and removed her rifle. "I've dealt with troublemakers before." "Not like this," Quinn argued. "Not outnumbered. We stay, we fight if we must, but we do it together." The determination in his eyes both frustrated and moved her. For years, she had faced every challenge alone, convinced it was the only way to survive. Now, confronted with genuine danger, she found herself with unexpected allies, and more terrifyingly, she found herself grateful for their presence. "Fine," she conceded, "but we need a plan better than standing our ground and hoping for the best." Together, they formulated a strategy. The boy was sent back to his mother with instructions to ride for the marshal in Silver Creek at first light if they didn't hear otherwise. Quinn and Wallace helped Nora secure the cabin, creating defensive positions and escape routes should they be needed. As they worked, Nora was struck by how naturally they moved as a unit, anticipating each other's thoughts, complementing each other's strengths. It was a kind of dance she had forgotten existed, people working in concert rather than isolation. "You're good at this," she observed as Quinn fashioned a primitive alarm system from tin cans and twine across the likely approach. "Pa was a scout during the war," he explained. "Taught me a thing or two about preparing for trouble." Wallace nodded gravely. Always hoped he'd never need those lessons. Seems the frontier had other ideas. By midnight, they were as prepared as they could be. The boy had long since departed, and they had taken turns watching the approach to the cabin. So far, there had been no sign of the riders. "You should rest," Quinn told Nora as he relieved her at the window. "I'll wake you if anything changes." Exhausted from tension and preparation, she nodded. As she passed him, he caught her hand briefly. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said quietly, "I'm glad I stopped at your cabin that night." The simple truth in his words pierced the last of her defenses. "So am I," she admitted. Then, before she could reconsider, she leaned in and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek before retreating to her room. Sleep came fitfully, and she woke before dawn to find Quinn dozing in the chair by the window, rifle across his lap. The sight of him there, committed to protecting her home alongside his father, forced her to confront a painful truth. She had been wrong about solitude. It wasn't safety, it was merely the absence of risk. And perhaps life without risk wasn't really living at all. The riders came at dawn, just as the first golden lights spilled across the eastern hills. Nora spotted them from the barn where she'd gone to check on the new calf. 3 men approaching slowly, their intent clear in their formation. She slipped back to the cabin, finding Quinn and Wallace already alert. "They're coming," she said simply. "3, as the boy said. Quinn nodded, his face set with determination. "Remember the plan. Let them state their business first. Could be they're just passing through." But they all knew better. The cautious approach, the spread formation, these were men with purpose, not travelers seeking directions. When the riders reached the edge of the yard, they stopped, assessing the cabin. The leader, a heavily bearded man with a scar crossing his cheek, called out, "Hello, the house. Looking for a woman supposed to be living out here alone." Nora stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but visibly. "I'm Nora Ellis. This is my property. State your business." The men exchanged glances, clearly not expecting to find her so direct or well-armed. "Heard you might be in the market to sell," the leader said, his tone falsely friendly. "We represent some interests looking to expand in these parts." "Not selling," Nora replied firmly, "and not interested in discussing it further." The leader's expression hardened. "Might want to reconsider, miss. Not safe for a woman alone out here. All sorts of accidents can happen." At that moment, Quinn emerged from the cabin to stand beside her, his own rifle in hand. Wallace appeared at the side of the house, positioned to cover the approach from another angle. "As you can see," Quinn said coolly, "Miss Ellis isn't alone." The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you, mister. Best mind your own business." "Miss Ellis's safety is my business," Quinn replied, his voice level but with steel beneath. A tense silence followed as the riders assessed the new odds. 3 against 3 was considerably less appealing than 3 against 1. "Maybe we should continue this discussion another time," the leader finally said, though his eyes promised trouble. There won't be another time, Wallace called, his weathered face showing no fear. Miss Ellis has made her position clear. I suggest you move along before the situation becomes unpleasant. One of the other riders leaned over to the leader, speaking too quietly for Nora to hear. After a moment's consideration, the scarred man nodded. We'll be moving on for now, he announced. But this territory's changing. Independent holdings like this, they're becoming a thing of the past. Remember that. As they turned their horses, the leader fixed his gaze on Quinn. And you, boy, might want to consider whether dying for another man's land is worth it. Not another man's land, Quinn corrected. Hers. And yes, it would be. The simple conviction in his words sent a shiver through Nora. The riders departed, dust rising in their wake as they headed back toward town. They'll be back, Wallace said grimly once they were out of earshot. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but they will. With more men next time, Quinn added. That type always does. Nora lowered her rifle, tension draining from her shoulders. You should go, she told them, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. They're right. This isn't your fight. Quinn turned to her, his expression intense. Is that really what you want? For us to leave you to face this alone? It's what makes sense, she insisted, but with less conviction than before. Does it? Wallace interjected. 3 riders today, maybe 6 next time. Those odds don't improve with us gone. Quinn stepped closer. Nora, listen to me. Those men, they're counting on you being alone, being vulnerable. That's why they target women homesteaders, widows, people they think won't or can't fight back. I can fight, she said stubbornly. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to fight alone. He took her hand, his touch warm and steady. Not anymore. The walls she'd built around her heart for 3 long years began to crumble. What are you saying, Quinn? I'm saying I don't want to ride on to Helena. I'm saying that in less than a week, you've made me question everything I thought I knew about moving on and putting down roots. His blue eyes held hers, unwavering. I'm saying I think I'm falling in love with you, Nora Ellis, and the thought of leaving you alone to face those men, or anything else, breaks something inside me. Nora felt dizzy, overwhelmed by emotions she denied for too long. You can't mean that. You barely know me. I know enough, he insisted. The rest, we can learn together. If you'll let me stay. Wallace cleared his throat. Perhaps I should check on that new calf, he said tactfully, moving toward the barn with a knowing smile. Alone with Quinn, Nora struggled to articulate the fears that had governed her life for so long. Everyone I've ever loved has left me, she whispered. How do I know you won't do the same? I can't promise I'll never die, Quinn said gently. No one can. But I can promise I'll choose you. Choose us, every day I'm given. And isn't that worth the risk? The question hung between them, a challenge to everything she believed about survival on the frontier. Was safety in isolation truly living? Or was it merely existing, waiting for a life that never began? Looking into Quinn's eyes, seeing the honesty and hope there, Nora made her decision. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and tentatively placed her hand against his cheek. Yes, she whispered. It's worth the risk. When their lips met, it felt like coming home after a journey she hadn't known she was making. Back to human connection, to possibility, to hope. His arms encircled her, strong and protective but not confining, offering support without demanding submission. Later, as the sun climbed higher and Wallace tactfully remained occupied with chores far from the cabin, they talked of practical matters. The riders who would return, the homestead that needed tending, the future that suddenly held possibilities beyond mere survival. Pa can still go to my uncle's, Quinn suggested. He'd be more comfortable there for the winter. And I can write to the marshal in Silver Creek about those men. The law's reaching further into the territory these days. And us? Nora asked, still scarcely believing there could be an us. Quinn smiled, bringing her hand to his lips. That's for you to decide. I know what I want, Nora. A life with you, here or elsewhere. But it has to be your choice. The freedom of that offering, to choose connection rather than have it forced or denied, was perhaps the greatest gift he could have given her. Stay, she said simply. Help me make this a home again, not just a place to survive. His smile was like sunrise after the longest night. Nothing would make me happier. 6 months later, as summer's heat gave way to autumn's gentle cooling, Nora stood on the porch of what was now their cabin, watching Quinn return from town with supplies. The changes to the homestead were visible everywhere. Expanded gardens, repaired fences, a new lean-to for the growing herd, smoke rising from Mrs. Willoughby's chimney just a quarter-mile away, where the widow had relocated at Nora's invitation after the rider's threats proved more than idle. The marshal had eventually caught 2 of the men after they'd terrorized another homesteader, but the scarred leader remained at large. Still, with neighbors closer and the law taking notice, the immediate danger had receded. Wallace had indeed gone to Helena for the winter but returned in spring, declaring his brother's place too crowded for an old man, and taking up residence in the newly built addition to Nora's cabin. His presence added warmth to their home and an extra pair of eyes when Quinn occasionally took work breaking horses for neighboring ranches. But the greatest change was within Nora herself. The woman who had once defined safety as solitude now found her greatest security in connection. To Quinn, to Wallace, to the Willoughbys, to the growing network of homesteaders who had begun to form a community of mutual support against both natural hardships and human threats. As Quinn dismounted, his face broke into the smile that still made her heart skip. "Mrs. Irving," he greeted, using the name she'd taken just 2 months prior in a simple ceremony performed by the circuit preacher. "Mr. Irving," she returned, descending the steps to meet him. "Any news from town?" "Nothing urgent." He pulled her into an embrace, kissing her with the same enthusiasm as their first kiss. "But the general store got those seeds you wanted for next spring." Nora smiled against his lips. "Good. We'll need a bigger garden now." Quinn pulled back slightly, searching her face. "We will." Her hand drifted to her stomach, still flat but harboring their secret. "By next harvest, there'll be another Irving to feed." The joy that transformed his face was worth every moment of fear she'd overcome to let him into her life. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her in a circle of pure elation before setting her gently down. "A baby," he breathed, wonder in his voice. "Our baby." From the doorway, Wallace chuckled. "About time you told him. Old man like me can't keep secrets like that for long." Quinn looked between them, incredulous. "You knew?" "Women get a certain glow," Wallace said sagely. "Recognized it from when your mother was carrying you." As the 3 of them moved into the cabin, their home, their sanctuary, their future, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From believing solitude was her only safety to embracing a life rich with connections and, yes, risks. The frontier remained hard, unforgiving in its demands and dangers. But she no longer faced it alone, standing sentinel against an uncaring world. Instead, she faced it as part of something stronger, a family, a community, a future built on love rather than fear. That night, as she lay in Quinn's arms listening to his plans for a cradle and dreaming of their child's future, Nora finally understood the truth her father had never learned. The frontier's greatest gift wasn't independence, but the chance to build meaningful connections in a world that offered no guarantees. She had lived alone for years, until a cowboy with his old father asked, "Can we stay one night?" And in answering yes to that simple question, she had found the courage to say yes to life itself.